If we could turn back to our agenda, please. Item 2 is the due execution of the President's mandate to be certified, so I call upon the lay secretary.
In accordance with Regulation 16.2, in the second chapter of Volume 1 of the Constitution, I hereby certify the due execution of the President's mandate.
Thank you very much. There are some announcements to be made. I'm sorry they are numerous, they are legion, but it's important that we do get some of them sorted at the beginning of our meeting. Can I begin by welcoming our friends who are here representing their church communities? It's wonderful to have you here with us corporately. Croeso cynnes I bob un ohonoch chi. Ac yn enwedig, gai ddweud yn Gymraeg, you'll need your headsets, please. I'm just going to say a few words in Welsh, if I may. Ac yn gyntaf, croeso mawr I Canon Aled Edwards sydd yma, prif weithredwr cytun. Dyma'r cyfarfod ola I Aled fod gyda ni fel cadeirydd cytun. Mae wedi bod yn prif weithredwr am 23 o flynyddoedd gyda'r cytun ac yn gadael gyn gyntag ac mae olynwyr yn cael ei benodi. Gai ddweud, Aled, gair o ddiolch ar gyfer yr Eglwys yng Nghymru I chdi yn benodol. Ac yn enwedig y gwaith cymdeithasol dych chi wedi ymwneud yng Nghymru ar ein cyferni. Mae wedi bod yn fraint I weld eich gwaith ac yn enwedig gyda'r ffywyduriaid a'ch egni tuag at pobl sydd yn llai ffodus na ni. Diolch o galon am yr atgof bod un o'r prif pethau I ni fel eglwysi yw I pleidleisio ac yn gweithio ar gyfer cyfiawnder. Mae wedi bod yn fraint. Diolch o galon I chi am eich gwaith. It's a great pleasure to welcome, on behalf of the Church of Ireland, the Reverend Canon Malcolm Kingston. Malcolm, welcome to you. It's lovely to have you here. Thank you so much for being with us. One of the honorary secretaries of the General Synod of the Church of Ireland and rector of St. Mark's Armagh. No stranger to this meeting at all. Stephen, welcome back to you. We're so delighted you've been able, again, to represent the Methodist Church, the Wales Synod. Dr. Stephen Wigley is here today and tomorrow morning. Croeso nôl, Betty, diolch o galon ni eto am fod gyda ni sydd yn cynrychioli wrth gwrs yr undeb yr annibynwyr Cymraeg. Betty Wyn-James, again, very well known to us, who is representing the Union of Welsh Independence. And Reverend Brian Matthews, it's good to have you here as well. Welcome back. We're so glad you're able to represent the Presbyterian Church of Wales. Can I remind GB that we have in the past given permission to all of our friends to participate in a conference, and I'm sure that that will be repeated again on this occasion. There'll be an opportunity for us to confirm that in a moment. Even though they don't vote, we do invite their participation at the microphones. Safety. We've encouraged each of you to be conscious of the fact that we are living in a post-COVID environment. Please do feel at liberty to wear masks. And if you do feel unwell, please do get yourself tested and immediately inform us. And of course, you should isolate in order to make sure that we don't become super spreaders here in this gathering. Please do take a responsible, as I'm sure you will, a responsible attitude towards the ongoing COVID virus and situation. John Connell is once again in charge, wherever you are, John, of worship. John, thank you so much. I know you're not well. Thank you for coming to be with us. Thank you to John Davis, too, for playing the piano, playing all the right notes and in the right order. Which was great. Thank you, John, for helping us in worship. The collection at GB, at our worship, will go towards Bryn Awel Rehab. I had the opportunity to visit Bryn Awel perhaps about 6 weeks ago and see the work that they're doing, making an enormous difference to people who are suffering with addiction. And it will be super if we can be generous in our contribution, you will save lives. It's as simple as that. So please do be generous if you can in the collection, and please ask the stewards if you need any information about how to do that. Bryn Awel's website, www.brynawel.org, is there, which provides you with more information. There are some organisations who are bringing exhibitions to our gathering. Open Doors, we'd hoped would be here this morning, but Jim Stewart, I'm afraid, is unwell, but hoping to be with us tomorrow. We know Open Doors draws our attention to the persecuted church across the world and provides excellent prayer material. Do hope that they'll be able to join us. The Bible Society is here and will be, as part of the Year of Biblical Literacy, which is ongoing, will be giving a presentation. The CEO of the Bible Society is Mr. Paul Williams, and he'll be joined by Nigel Langford, who is the Director of Domestic Mission. They will be presenting, I think, tomorrow on our agenda. We look forward to that very much, but delighted the Bible Society have got material. Do take a look at what they've got. My Church People, you will know a little bit perhaps about that, a joint venture between IT, DBS and the safeguarding teams. It's a database used to create, manage and store our DBS information, certificate data, and also our training operations and our safeguarding training. The database is being launched over the rest of 2022 and 2023, and the stall at the back of the meeting is to help raise awareness of the database and provide demonstrations. Do talk to Becky and Becky if you need any information. They're waving even now at us to come and talk to us about that. That's super. If you are intent upon bringing a motion to the governing body or an amendment, I remind you that 2 written copies are required, signed by the proposer today. Amendments should be given to the lay secretary, to Canon Simon Lloyd, and the lay secretary has confirmed that an email sent to amendments@churchinwales.org.uk shall be deemed satisfactory to meet the requirements of providing 2 written copies. There will be some other non-members who will be with us at this meeting. From Hope Street and Citizen Church, item 12, Mr. Paul Booth, Vision Programme Manager for Where Faith Matters in the Diocese of Llandaff, and Mrs. Diane McCarthy, who is, of course, the Diocesan Secretary for that diocese, for St. Asaph, Mr. Gwilym Dyfri-Jones, Provost of the Lampeter and Carmarthen campuses, University of Wales Trinity St. David, will be present for item 13. I've mentioned Professor Paul Williams, CEO of Bible Society, and Mr. Langford, who is the Director of Domestic Mission within the Bible Society. We'll also be joined by the Reverend Dr. Mark Griffiths, who is the Dean of Discipleship for St. Paddens, for item 22. Could I ask your support en bloc for all of these people to speak at the governing body? And would you please show your hands if you're content for them all to do so? Thank you. Are there any who are opposing that? There are none. Thank you very much indeed. Unwaith eto, yn Gymraeg, can I ask you just to put your headsets on for a moment? Mae'n groeso wrth gwrs I bob un ohonoch chi cyfrannu ai yn Gymraeg neu yn Saesneg. Just I roi eiliad i'r cyfieithydd I fod yn anwybydus bod chi'n siarad yn y Gymraeg, just dweud bod chi yn siarad yn y Gymraeg a wedyn cario ymlaen. Mae'r headset yn gweithio. Mae'n croeso bob un ohonoch chi I cyfrannu yn y cyfarfod. Sorry, Simon, please.
Missed that bit out there.
I've missed something out. Could I return to the bit about non-members? Yes, of course. There will also be a number of employees, both from the RB and the DBFs, who will be here, and those who serve on various national and diocesan committees, particularly important for our conversation around the 10-year plan. Can I ask you to extend your permission for them to speak as well, and would you please show? Thank you very much. I'm grateful for that. One of the saddest bits of chairing GBs is when we have to draw attention to people who are no longer with us, and there are two significant people who have died since our last meeting, and I want to say a word about both, if I may. You will all remember Miss Sylvia Scarf, OBE, an extraordinarily energetic and colourful member of the Church in Wales and of this body. She died on the 7th of June this year, long-serving member of the governing body, having been a member continuously from 1966 until her retirement in 2011. First co-opted as an under-30 member from the period 1966 to 68, following which she was elected by the Diocese of Llandaff. She missed only one meeting, when she was attending a meeting of the Anglican Consultative Council on our behalf. On one occasion, she even attended in her wheelchair. Some members of the governing body will remember Sylvia for her presenting reports from the ACC, attired in that extraordinary hat she would wear. She was, of course, presented with the OBE for services to both the Anglican Communion and the Girl Guides. A former member of the GB chairs, the Standing Committee, and Deputy Chair of the Board of Mission and former Chair of the Child Protection Committee. She was an extraordinary Christian woman. We give thanks for her life. Also, that Howell Jones, Archdeacon Howell, died on the 24th of August 2022, and I believe his funeral was yesterday. It's today. Thank you, Paul. Serving as Archdeacon of Cardigan between 1990 and 2006, he was my immediate predecessor in that role when he retired both as Archdeacon and also from the governing body. During his time as Archdeacon, he served as vicar of Llanachaian with Llanddeiniol. Over the course of a long ministry in the Diocese of St David's, he served as vicar of Llanbadarn Fawr from 1979 to 92, as well as vicar of Capel Bangor and Goginan from 1982, and was also warden of readers for 20 years from 1982. Earlier in his ministry, Howell was a curate in St Peter's Carmarthen and was then appointed vicar of Cynwyl and Llanysawel and Tally. As a GB member, he was well known and well liked, not only for his dedication to maintaining standards in graveyards, his favourite passion, but also for the jokes he frequently told at GB. In his retirement at Bro Padarn, he was always ready to help others and used his long experience of service to offer advice and help. I understand that even until about 4 months ago, he was regularly on the rota for helping of services in that ministry area, according to the area dean. After the service today in Llanbadarn Fawr, there will be a private committal at the crematorium. I know you will all hold Howell's wife Anne and their children Matthew and Elin in their loss and in your prayers. Would you please stand? We remember Sylvia Scarf and the Venerable Howell Jones and give thanks for their contribution to the life and work of our church. Rest eternal grant unto them, O Lord, and that light shall shine upon them. Thank you very much. Those are all of the notices. Thank you very much for your forbearance in what is quite a trying list of things, but they are important. We turn to item 3 on the agenda, minutes of the ordinary meeting of the governing body held in April the 27th and 28th of this year. A reminder that you are invited to notify the Secretariat in advance of any changes that you think need to be made to those minutes, so that information should be available beforehand. No member has raised any point on the minutes of the 27th and 28th. May I then sign the minutes as a correct record of the meeting of the governing body held in April the 27th and 28th. Would you please show your cards? Are there any who object? There are none. I will now sign the minutes. Thank you very much with that, and with that I vacate the chair and ask Dean Sarah to come.
Hello, Bore da pawb. It's lovely to be with you all, and in the chair for the first time, in the hot seat. Before I ask the Archbishop to deliver his presidential address, let me note two things. The first is that this will be followed by an opportunity for members to interact with the President, that is, to ask questions, make comments, etc. So you might want to bear that in mind as you listen. And the other thing is to let you know that as soon as he has completed the address, it will be available online, the full text, via the Church in Wales website. There will be a link there. So if you need to refer back to what he has said, that's where you will find it. So, Your Grace, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Andrew, Archbishop of Wales. Everybody, sooner or later, sits down to a banquet of consequences. This and its variants are usually attributed to the author Robert Louis Stevenson, famous, of course, for Treasure Island and The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But the words are not actually found in any of his works, even though they're based on a genuine quotation from an essay called Old Mortality. But what happens, of course, is that sayings are shaped and reshaped and reused and resculptured, and eventually they lose touch with their original meaning and take on another. But at its face values, it's a kind of warning, isn't it? Everybody, sooner or later, sits down to a banquet of consequences, a kind of warning, a judgment, or in TikTok speak, this is instant karma. The background to our meeting today and our situation more broadly in Wales is, of course, being determined by several factors. It's one of those weeks, isn't it? That was the week that was. We're experiencing more of what's being referred to as the post-COVID experience, the ongoing consequences for health, for economy, for well-being, national and global economies, as well as, of course, church life. There is a cost of living crisis rivaling that of the financial crash of 2008. The rate of inflation in July was the highest for 40 years. There is the real and ongoing influence of secularism, the attendant church decline, at least Sunday attendance decline. Like many other churches throughout the world, attendance levels have yet to recover to pre-COVID figures. And then there is the troubling and ongoing unstable geopolitical situation. Now in its 7th month, the war in Ukraine has had global consequences for the supply of food and fuel. And I want to say, of course, something about this. The words that I've used are well chosen. This is a crisis. The reality for many, many people across Wales and beyond, unless decisive action is taken on Thursday and very quickly after that, is that people will go hungry and they will be cold and in their thousands. This winter will be unbearable, and the cost to livelihoods, our well-being, the effect on household debt, the effect on crime, on domestic violence will be enormous. And even that notwithstanding, it's an outrage that in the sixth largest economy in the world, we have 3.1 million children who are living in general poverty before we get to today, who depend, many of them, on food banks to survive. Once intended to be an emergency service, it's now firmly embedded in the fabric of national life, where families and many in employment and at low wages cannot survive without it. And I know the countless number, those wonderful volunteers of disciples who staff the food banks, I thank them sincerely for their work, will agree this should not be the case. Of course, the wider landscape is changing each day, and we ought, as we have already, to welcome our new Prime Minister and to say that we will work with anyone, and especially her and her government, in everything that they do to alleviate poverty and to enable our citizens to flourish. However, I want to draw your attention to something that we ourselves must do as a church. We need to move from advocacy to action as well. We need to be not only preachy, but doey. We need to be people of deeds as well as of words. From the beginning of next month, the church in Wales will highlight each week one specific area of poverty and what we can do in response to it as Christians. Let me give you a flavour of what we are proposing. The role of supermarkets within our nation is well known, and I want to pay tribute to the way in which they already do an enormous amount to support charities and to make it possible for their foods to go a long way. They have removed their best before dates. They are very good and have extended their range of essentials or basics. And they are very good at using the networks to make sure that food that is surplus gets to people in need. The kind of too good to go, too good to waste kind of schemes that many of them actually offer. There are numerous apps which are available which make the food available online. So, for example, you can turn up to, I don't know, Starbucks at 7 o'clock on an evening and get whatever is left over. So that it doesn't go waste. And of course, you may or may not know, but supermarkets are actually taxed on any foodstuffs which are wasted. So it's in their interests to work with others to make sure we don't waste any food. And we do make sure it gets to the people who need it most. But they could do more. They could do much more. And we will be writing to them, I hope with the support of the Archbishops of Canterbury and York, who have already indicated their support, the Archbishop of Armagh, and also the Primus of the Episcopal Church of Scotland, asking them to triple the range of basics that they offer so that other food can also be made available and people can avoid some of the stigma which still attaches to attendance at food banks. I had the privilege recently, I'm going off piste, forgive me just a little bit, of going to the Well-Fed organisation, which is run in Shotton in the Diocese of St. Asaph, and an extraordinary operation which is working to ensure that people not only are educated about food, but can actually receive and buy food cheaply of the highest quality so that we become responsible stewards of what is given to us. And a charity which exists, of course, a non-profit making organisation, constantly reinvesting in their staff and in their professional working, is making an enormous impact in that part of the world. They've agreed to be a part of our campaign so that we together can find alternative ways in which people do not go hungry. Our church people are always at their very best when they are asked to do something. And that's why, another example, I am asking every congregation in the church in Wales, if they can, to make at least 10 boxes in the Advent period, whether it's a shoe size or whether it's bigger than that, again, 10 boxes of the sorts of things, whether they are toiletries or whether they are foodstuffs or treats or toys, whatever it is that can be found and put together to make a difference to their local communities. Using the food bank network as our distribution point, that will mean 10,000 boxes at least will be available to those who would otherwise have very, very little. Some churches will find that a challenge. Others will do 10 overnight and might, a little like the parable, do 100 or 10 times 100. They can multiply it and make an enormous difference. In the cold, wet, windy month of January, you could be lifesavers. You could make it the difference between having something or having nothing. And that's the challenge I want to ask from the governing body, so that we are seen not only to be people who have a message, but we deliver on our faith. We are not only speakers of generosity, we are doers of generosity. For every week leading up until Christmas, and we will see what happens beyond that, we are wanting to say to our nation, there are things that we can do together which will make a difference. We can make a difference. And one thing we ought to be really clear about one with another. You know, our task as a church has never been to try and save ourselves, the institution, to keep things on the road. You know, when organizations try and do that and forget their core purpose, they lose sight of the very thing for which they exist. Our purpose has always been to worship God, to proclaim Jesus Christ, and to make transforming disciples of all peoples. I've long been inspired. I remember as a very young Christian memorizing Galatians 2:20. It speaks to me still. I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live. The life I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. But we know that institutions that are driven by anxiety or fearfulness, rather than St. Paul's confidence, his grounded hope, they are much less attractive than those that are characterized by purpose and authentic humility. In the last year, many of us have realized that if we want to break new ground and make a decisive shift in our effectiveness, we need the right kind of resources, because our gospel and our message is already on song. Dwi am siarad yn y Gymraeg. I'd like to speak in Welsh now, if I may. Felly heddi, rwy'n cyhoeddi yn ffurfiol beth mae llawer ohonoch chi eisoes yn ei wybod, sef bod yr Eglwys yng Nghymru yn darparu adnodd ychwanegol arwyddocaol ar gyfer ein gweinidogaeth. Nad ydym erioed wedi gweld ei debyg o'r blaen. Pan cytunodd ymddiriedolwyr corff y cynrychiolwyr i fuddsoddi'r arian hwn, roedd yn gam ddewr o ffydd. Mae'n seiliedig ar yr argyhoeddiad fod gan yr Eglwys yr ewyllys a'r galon i dyfu ac i wneud pethau newydd. Ar draws yr esgobaethau ac fel talaith, bydd yr arian newydd hwn yn adeiladu'r gallu ac yn creu momentum newydd. Sef yn union beth ydym ei angen ac rwy'n canmol y cam ei ofn. Rwyf eisiau talu ternged i ymddiriedolwyr corff y cynrychiolwyr am ei harweinyddiaeth weledigaethol. Mae'r bydd soddiad arfaethedig yn gofyn am strategaeth mewn sawl rhan. Yn y lle cyntaf, mae'n rhaid i ni gydnabod nad oes gan y ddwy esgobaeth fwyaf newydd, sef Trefonwy ac Abertawe ac Aberhonddu, adnoddau hanesyddol rai o'r esgobaethau sydd wedi ei hen sefydlu. Felly, rwy'n falch o allu cyhoeddi fod ymddiriedolwyr corff cynrychiolydd wedi ryddhau 3.7 miliwn o bunnau yn ychwanegol bob blwyddyn am y 10 mlynedd nesaf. A byddwn yn ei defnyddio i sicrhau fod gan yr holl esgobaethau yr arian ar gyfer y gweithgareddau craidd. Ar yr un pryd, byddwn yn archwilio meysydd o'n bywyd gyda'n gilydd i sicrhau fod unrhyw ddyblygu dianghenraid o weithgaredd yn cael ei ffrwyno, a'i bod yn manteisio ar y cyfleoedd i gydweithio'n cael eu cymryd. Yn ail, gallaf gyhoeddi heddiw y bydd 100 miliwn o bunnau yn cael ei dynnu o'r arian wrth gefn yn ystod y 10 mlynedd nesaf, ar gyfer adnoddau efengylu a thyfu'r eglwys yn yr eglwys yng Nghymru. Wrth gwrs, dim ond unwaith y gallwn wario'r arian hwn, ac mae gofyn cynllunion ofalus sut y bydd yn cael ei ddirannu, a sut y byddwn yn dal ein gilydd y cyd-atebol am sut mae'n cael ei ddefnyddio. Mae rhaid i ni gyffesu heddi, mae yna her, mae yna rai sy'n darogan y diwedd yr eglwys yng Nghymru, ac o bosib ddim hyd yn oed eisio i ni lwyddo. Mae rai yn ein hystyried ni ychydig ar ôl yr oes gyda'n ceidwadaeth ac ymlyniad a'n gorffennol, sy'n gwneud yn ei edrych am yn ôl, gyda hiraeth yn hytrach nag ymlaen gyda chyffro, disgwyliad a ffydd. Hiraeth yw ein hoff air. Nid fod yr holl negyddoldeb yn dod y tu allan i'r teulu eglwysig, ac mae hynny yn wael. Nid o Gymru, y mae'n cyfan yn dod chwaith. A falle bod rhywfaint o seicoleg ryfedd yma, ryddhad ofnadwy rwy'n sy'n suddo yn gynt na ni. Felly, gyda'n gilydd, dylem benderfynu ein bod yn mynd i ymrwymo gyda'n gilydd, dangos bod ein defrywr yn anghywir. Ni fyddwn yn camu'n y dawel i'r fagddu. Eisoes mae'r eglwys yng Nghymru wedi dangos yn ystod y pandemig pa mor gyflym mae'n gallu ymateb i heriau ac i gymryd penderfyniadau ei ofn. Does dim rhaid i ni rando ar lysiau'r dilonwyr o ble bynnag y daw. Mae Cymdeithas yn dal yn bennaf yn eitha amheus o fywyd sefydliadol, ein wleidyddol neu'n ddiwylliannol neu'n grefyddol. Ond mae hynny yn gymaint o gyfle ac o her, oherwydd nad oes gan ffydd yn Iesu Grist bellach y mae etifeddiaeth y byd Cristnogol. So, my friends, the question is really very simple. What might this resource enable us to achieve? The Bench of Bishops is, of course, consulting widely with others on the kind of developments which are likely to be most fruitful. We already know there are key territories which require new energy and new investment. In order for our mission and ministry areas to work more effectively and fruitfully, we will need to develop our ministries and our skill base to maximize our effectiveness. In other words, we are not simply expecting people to pedal harder, to work harder. We see the need for a stronger ministerial base, which involves developing new ministries, commissioned as well as licensed, as well as rejuvenating our lay people who are the heart of church life. We will set new benchmarks and deliver training which will be world class. We do not believe that skills are the only essential at all. Formation of the whole person means being alive to God in Jesus Christ, deeply self-aware and committed to one's own discipleship, alongside developing new skills to enable us to be effective. Rowan Williams quotes Dom Gregory Dix in The Shape of the Liturgy, coining the phrase Eucharistic man, and he means woman as well. Summoning up the call to be remade in the image of the crucified and risen Jesus. He says, we are a new human species who makes sense of the world in the presence of the risen Jesus at his table. Isn't that good? It's brilliant. We are a new human species, referencing Paul's 2 Corinthians, a new creation, who makes sense of the world in the presence of the risen Jesus at his table. Now, we regard this kind of development as a shared, as a province-wide undertaking to which all of the dioceses will commit themselves. But we must also work so closely within our mission and ministry areas. Here it is that our primary ministry is undertaken. And we've seen and we glean several things. We've seen that what we call the inherited church life has so much to offer. Whether through life events potential, the weekly nurture of faith in worship, whether in the sacralizing of secular life, such as civic engagements or the work with schools and other associations. It is the established church, when animated by God's Holy Spirit, who discover that God, our God, is one step ahead. It's God who opens doors. It's God who creates new spaces. It's God who makes new opportunities for engagement and making the gospel relevant and exciting. But the inertia which all too often is born of a legacy from which we struggle to free ourselves. Stipendiary clergy can sometimes be overwhelmed with diaries too full to do the things that are necessary. The day-to-day work can squeeze us so tightly there is a little room for planning and less still to oversee a missional community committed to an outward focus. Reframing the tasks is much harder to achieve than to state here. Forgive my rereading of Paul's text, but all too often we let the church squeeze us into its mold. Romans 12. A ministry area leader must preside and ensure that all the critical and necessary tasks of ministry flourish. And the priest who thinks they are the only source of ministry will not survive the changes. We're called to a ministry of collaborative oversight, which enables others to flourish and others to be disciples in this God's world. And all of this means investing enormously within our diocese, an additional resource which allows these ministry areas to flourish. New lay ministry, fully supported, fully authorized. It may mean additional clergy. It will necessitate the appropriate administrative support to ensure sound delivery of plans and projects. But if we've learned anything from this 10 years since we established our mission and ministry areas, it is that we do not need to limit ourselves to the inherited church. It's been a source of enormous encouragement to see some of the new initiatives which are seen in pioneering work or in church planting. And we are committing ourselves to expand both of these significantly, sharing the lessons that we are learning and being willing to work across the diocese if necessary, and wherever possible, with sisters and brothers who share our hope in Christ. I'm so grateful to the bishops of Llandaff and to St. Asaph for agreeing to pioneer further the church plant initiatives so that the whole church can learn from their experience and in undefended grace learn what they can teach. How we invest across the church in the unique context of all of our dioceses is a question which we bring to the floor today, prayerfully, longingly, critically, and humbly. We discern as a governing body together what it is that God is saying. But let us be in no doubt at all about one thing. This is the most serious and significant investment the church has known since its disestablishment. The plans that we intend will be radical, far-reaching, and have capacity to deliver on our deepest longings for Wales. So the next steps require our active participation and our prayerful engagement. Have we got this right? Where are the gaps? What have we missed? How can we deepen our sense this is a kairos moment? How can we spend time on our knees in prayer and on our feet in proclamation? How can we translate longing for the kingdom to be seen in simple and manifest ways at a local level? How can we ensure strong stakeholder ownership of this vision? It is to these questions, supremely, that we must give ourselves. And so I began with Robert Louis Stevenson, his banquet of consequences. Sooner or later, he said, we all sit down to a banquet of consequences. If we let this moment pass, this opportunity dissipate, the consequences will be a Wales that knows less of the love of Jesus Christ than at any time in modern history. But if we commit ourselves to the conviction that God is calling us to be bearers of hope in a new way, we will have done something beautiful, profound, and eternal. We do not need to spend our way out of decline. We need to invest where our hearts burn. Such an investment is laden with huge potential and hope. Here, the banquet of consequences is laden with fruit and many, many good things. Thanks be to God. Amen.
As you will have noticed, we're already past 11 o'clock. But the glamorous assistant to my left advises the following. We will now carry on until 20 past 11, and then we will shave 5 minutes off the coffee break and reconvene at 11:45. So, if you would like to make a response to what the Archbishop has said, can I ask you all to line up here so we know broadly how many people are likely to want to comment or ask a question or otherwise respond? And we'll see, I think what we'll do, if we actually I'm just trying to work out. We'll either take you in one group or two groups, and then I'll ask the Archbishop to respond to the batch. So, Dean, if you'd like to take the podium, and could you all please remember to introduce yourselves?
Ian Black, nominated Dean of Newport, Crusoe Castlnewydd. Welcome to our home patch. Firstly, I'm very grateful to the Archbishop for highlighting in his address the cost of living crisis and the need for decisive government action. We are at a moment of national emergency, and I don't think any of us need that. We all will know people who are on the edge, about to break, may even be breaking, businesses who are extremely worried about what's going to happen. And I want to emphasise and reiterate what the Archbishop said and send a message from this governing body for the new Prime Minister tomorrow to be bold and to make radical decisions. There is a lot of talk about freezing the price of energy at the current level, and I think there are serious economists who are saying we just have to do that because the consequences are so enormous if that is not done. And I would want to give strength to the new Prime Minister to be bold and take the necessary action that needs to happen. And a review and a change of the way energy pricing is calculated. There is a need for market reform. This system is broken and people are breaking as a result of it. So I'm very grateful to the Archbishop for highlighting that, and I hope his words are heard much more widely. We know we need help for households, we need help for charities. Churches are not exempt from this, and our own bills as people who have responsibility for churches are about to be significantly impacted, which could actually cause major difficulties without the action, and businesses are as well. There is a second aspect to this as well, and that is picking up on our vote last time, our commitment that the governing body gave to a climate change strategy, and that's the imperative that any strategy going forward must include a commitment to enhance and to increase investment in renewables and a commitment to those, because without that we have no long-term strategy, we have short-termism, and we know from the last summer that we've just experienced what climate change is doing to us, with droughts here in Wales and with floods in Pakistan. This is a moment of emergency, a moment of crisis. It is a kairos moment, a moment when decisive action is needed, and it's at a scale of our major political leaders. And so from this platform and with the governing body, I hope we were able to send a very strong encouragement to our new Prime Minister to act tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, please do. We are conscious of the time. I think my suggestion to business managers is next time more space must be allowed for this, but please, thank you.
Thank you very much. Your Grace, governing body, Susan Fogarty, lay Pioneer Minister, Bangor Diocese. Just a very short strapline here. Listening to you today, Your Grace, is really inspiring for me, and all I have that comes to mind is the optimism of the action is better than the pessimism of the thought. That's what's come through to me today. The whole idea that we turn to serving our communities as a priority rather than serving ourselves and serving only our churches. And this wonderful investment, this releasing of funds from the RB means that we can work from a place of invested abundance rather than what often feels like a place of scarcity. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tony Mullins, lay Llandaff. Archbishop, extremely excited, and I have to confess, you're doing exactly what I want the Church in Wales to do. Might I respectfully suggest that whilst I can take all the points back to my congregations, the 6 churches in our ministry area, with enthusiasm and excitement. We need to get the message into the homes of the people who don't come into our churches. And might I suggest primetime television use some of the money to get into the homes in Wales of the people who think that we only spend our time on our knees and with no action attached to it. Thank you so much for this. If I went home now, you've achieved your goal in Governing Body. It's wonderful. Thank you very much.
Andy Grimwood, Archdeacon St Asaph, Chair, Archbishop, members. Can I thank you, Archbishop, for bringing to our attention the cost of living crisis. But can I share a story? This time last week, I had 2 of my mission area leaders come to see me. One of them is from an urban coastal mission area. The other was from a rural mission area, and they came independently. And they came to ask my permission to shut their churches because they will not be able to afford to heat them this winter. And this will be the 2nd year in a time of crisis they have had to close their churches. And so I suppose, Archbishop, what I would like governing body to do is to call on the church in Wales to deliver on its faith, to put its money where its mouth is and give our mission areas money to keep its church buildings open during this crisis, and perhaps to provide warm hubs that can be used by the local community to provide heating. But I really do not think we should be closing churches when our country is at a time of crisis. And then the second thing that happened to me last week is that I've had a number of our clergy and our lay workers email me saying, where can they find support to pay for their heating of their vicarages or their offices in church buildings that they're working from? So can I urge the RB governing body to consider whether there is some way in which we can help our clergy with the cost of heating. Thank you, Archbishop.
Thank you. Right, we're heading very close to 20 past, so if we can, but I'd like to take those who've taken the proper time to line up.
Mike Comore, Diocese of Llandaff, elected, Your Grace, Chair. Just a very quick point. I did want to say more, but I'm conscious of the time. I'm very excited, as many people here will be, by the very ambitious and bold things that we're going to be discussing and talking about in the next couple of days. But it's also said, isn't it, that sometimes God is in the details, and I'm very mindful of what you said, Archbishop Andrew, about food waste and so on. Many of us might have enjoyed a rather good dinner here last night. I just wonder how much of the enormous piles of food that seemed to be left over actually went to waste. And, you know, we need perhaps to consider how we put our own house in order, as well as proclaiming a message to the wider world. Thank you.
Peter Ratcliffe, elected St David's Diocese. Just very quickly, thank you, Archbishop, for your address. 2 things really spoke to me about poverty relief, which is desperately needed at this time. And I wonder whether it would be very missional. Now this money is being released. I'm very grateful for this money being released. I've been banging on about this for the last 5 years at governing body and when I was on the Diocesan Board of Finance. I wonder whether it would be Christian and missional to tithe on this, to give to food banks and to poverty relief for those in the greatest need at this time, because the emergency for the poorest in our society is already upon us. And it would show us, not just looking after ourselves, but show us actually giving to society, those in need, show that we are living out our faith and living out Scripture.
Thank you, Chair. James Henley, elected cleric, Monmouth. I was delighted to hear the significant investment that the Church in Wales is making the resources over the next 10 years to really put towards both addressing the structural issues within our diocese as well as evangelism and church growth. In the midst of a large commitment of resources, though, I can see a risk that the theological message we send is that what matters most is our own human activity as opposed to God's activity. Perhaps inadvertently, as some theologians have written, in the process colluding with the process of secularization itself, which says that what matters most is the imminent, the practical, what we ourselves can do. And so I wonder, how will the leadership of the Church in Wales, both lay and ordained, work towards the development of a practical theology alongside this investment, a practical theology of mission, which safeguards the central role of God's intervention and the direction of the Holy Spirit in the mission of God, so that we might truly, as the Archbishop said, not be spending our way out of decline, but investing where our hearts, perhaps even where God's heart, is burning. Thank you.
Your Grace.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you all of you for your engagement with those matters. Of course, yes to all of them, but particularly, if I can, in relation to the cost of living crisis, conscious that this is the most overwhelming challenge we face immediately as a church and as a nation. And I'm really grateful once more to both the national team and the representative body, because we want to be in listening mode in particular, and to find ways working also with our DBFs about the way in which we can respond, both to those within our care and obviously our churches, and the work that they do, supporting them in their mission and ministry. We are in part, I think, needing to wait until at least Thursday and to see what comes. But I give you this undertaking, having spoken to colleagues, that we will be giving ourselves very properly to how can we ensure that churches don't close? How can we ensure that we are able to continue to provide the ministry, which was so appreciated over the period of the pandemic? And how can we make sure that it dovetails into that overwhelming need for us to be bearers in many ways, a bleak period, real bearers of hope for the sake of Christ? We commit ourselves to all of that. We are listening, and we will come back with proposals in due course. Chair, that's all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So, coffee here we come, and start again by 10 to. Thank you very much indeed.